Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. I usually don't talk politics a whole lot or geopolitics just because it's such a messy thing and it's not really my expertise, but I thought I would share some of my thoughts regarding this whole nuclear deal happening with Iran. And there's people that are far more in tune with what's really going on, at least in the drama sense, in terms of what's happening with the deal and this whole drama between Israel and the United States and Iran and all that stuff. But I do want to share a couple things that I shared in a previous video, but because the title of the video was about something else, it was actually about internet fascism. I don't think it really got the attention it deserved, so that's why I'm doing this video to talk about this. Now, from what I understand, this whole thing with Iran and Israel and the nuclear program that they're trying to develop is that Obama pretty much turned his back on Netanyahu and Israel, and he's trying to reach a peace agreement or some sort of a nuclear deal with Iran. And what I pointed out in my other video, and what I'll point out here, is that there was a Brookings report that was published back in 2009 called Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Toward Iran. And in this document, it actually outlines a possible scenario of how to handle Iran. And I found it very interesting reading through some of this because it seems to be playing out exactly how they had hoped to on this Brookings report. So let me read for you this here. Now, this is talking about the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages to a persuasion approach. And this is the section that I think is interesting. It says here, for those who favor regime change or a military attack on Iran, either by the United States or Israel, there is a strong argument to be made for trying this option first. Inciting regime change in Iran would be greatly assisted by convincing the Iranian people that their government is so ideologically blinkered that it refuses to do what is best for the people and instead clings to a policy that could only bring ruin on the country. The ideal scenario in this case would be that the United States and the international community present a package of positive inducements so enticing that the Iranian citizenry would support the deal, only to have the regime reject it. In a similar vein, any military operation against Iran will likely be very unpopular around the world and require the proper international context, both to ensure the logistical support the operation would require and to minimize the blowback from it. The best way to minimize international opprobrium and maximize support, however grudging or covert, is to strike only when there is a widespread conviction that the Iranians were given but then rejected a superb offer, one so good that only a regime determined to acquire nuclear weapons and acquire them for the wrong reasons would turn it down. Under those circumstances, the United States or Israel could portray its operations as taken in sorrow, not anger, and at least some in the international community would conclude that the Iranians, quote, brought it on themselves by refusing a very good deal. Now, if you keep reading here, it says here, for similar reasons, the persuasion approach nicely sets up containment as a fallback strategy. If the United States and the international community offer the Iranian leadership a deal so good that they should not refuse it, but still do, they will convince much of the world that they are bound and determined to acquire nuclear weapons, and probably for nefarious purposes. More to the point, the kinds of harsh sanctions that would hopefully be on the table as part of this strategy would come into force if Tehran rejected the offer. The key is that these penalties would constitute a far more powerful set of constraints that Iran has faced in the past. In this way, containment is one of two natural outcomes of the persuasion approach. If Tehran accepts the deal, the threat from Iran is eliminated, but if it refuses the deal, the sanctions are imposed, creating a strong containment option. And then even the disadvantages seem to be playing out right now. It says here, to be successful, a persuasion approach would invariably require unpleasant compromises with third-party countries to secure their cooperation against Iran. In many cases, the United States would likely have to choose among very unpalatable options and decide whether securing international support on Iran is worth betraying some other national principle or interest. Interesting how that's pretty much what happened with Israel, right? This whole thing with, oh my gosh, Obama's turning his back on Israel, and that whole spiel there seems to be part of the script. The Iranians are unlikely to give a simple yes or no answer when the deal is finally presented. As in the past, their most likely answer will be yes, but, at least initially, they will attempt to see if they can wriggle out of the ultimatum, split the international coalition, or simply improve the terms and weaken the sanctions. If this is just part of a process to improve an offer that the regime has fundamentally decided to accept, it would be annoying, but not harmful. On the other hand, the regime may very well decide to reject the offer but feign acceptance while insisting on negotiating the details and use such a process to buy time. This is why the time limits and the automaticity of the sanctions are so important. If they are not part of the deal, then the Iranians could reasonably expect to escape the punishment and the wider emplacement of a containment regime against them altogether. And then you have this little gem here, Israeli preemption. The Israelis share all the above fears, although there is a range of opinion about the threat. Nevertheless, if Israel believed that the United States and the rest of the international community were not going to try to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear capability and were simply going to accept it and try to contain a nuclear-armed Iran, Jerusalem might decide that it had to act unilaterally to preclude any of the above risks. Although Israeli leaders seem to be well aware of the drawbacks of an Israeli airstrike against the Iranian nuclear sites, one cannot assume that they will not calculate that the payoff could be worth the cost. And it goes on. You guys can read this on your own, but it's just really interesting. You have deal reached for Congress to review the Iran pact. You have a few days ago dissing the deal. Iran's supreme leader throws the nuclear agreement into new uncertainty. Again, this is exactly what it says in the Brookings report, and then Obama has to do a little bit of damage control. Obama meets with Jewish American leaders to diffuse Iran fears. Then you have Netanyahu saying Nuke Deal will let Iran set up terror activities. This is just all staging. I mean, okay, so again, I'm not an expert on geopolitics. That's not really my field of study. I've only recently gotten into it as a few videos of mine have talked about, and it really gets into the whole idea of modern state of Israel and all this stuff. And I don't want to share my thoughts on that here right now, but I mean, from my perspective, where I sit, all this geopolitical staging is a distraction. I think they're doing all this, and they've always done stuff like this, but I think this is all staging for something else. And ultimately, what it is a way to bring in the New World Order, the global government, whatever you want to call it. They're trying to create different scenarios. They're trying to invoke certain tensions and keep the war machine going. And that's really where I'm at with this. I think when you get involved with political talk and geopolitics and all this stuff, you perpetuate the cycle. At least that's what I've seen. And what I've noticed is that even Christian pastors who, I respect and are elders, I've heard them say, just nuke Iran, just wipe them off the planet. And, as a Christian, it's like, really? You're going to really support this idea of just wiping out an entire nation with nukes just because they're a threat? Or are they even a threat, really? Or is that part of the script as well? So, this might infuriate some of you. Some of you might call me naive and stupid or whatever. That's fine. I've been getting a lot of that recently. So getting used to it even more than I already was before. But share your thoughts on what you think is going on and what's really behind this whole thing, because ultimately, in my opinion, this is all staging. I think it's made to stir up people like some folks I know, like I mentioned, how they were talking about just wipe, Iran off the map. They want to perpetuate the war machine. And if you think about it, according to certain reports, I mean, there's about 300,000 or 370,000 Christians living in Iran. So, if we're going to wipe out Iran, you're going to wipe out 370 or so thousand of your fellow brethren just because they live in Iran. It doesn't make any sense. And there are other reports that, there's less than 30,000 Jews that live in Iran. That's not much, but still, I'm just, I'm trying to wrap my head around how it's okay to think that there is this nation that is a nuclear threat. And so, to protect ourselves, we can go ahead and nuke them or destroy their facilities or whatever. I don't know. I tend to think that it's ridiculous thinking. And, some of you might say, well, they're not going to, destroy the whole nation. They're just going to go after, the facilities that actually are housing the nuclear projects and stuff like that. Okay, sure, whatever. That's whatever. But I mean, to me, it's just still perpetuating the war machine. And I think ultimately it's keeping us distracted from more important things going on to bring about this new world order. And remember, order out of chaos, that is their mantra. And they're obviously trying to invoke World War III. That's no surprise. And, if you doubt that this is all part of the New World Order agenda, I mean, go ahead and take a look at the opening ceremony of the Nuclear Security Summit that happened over a year ago, 2014. There was a lot of talk about this whole idea of a floating triangle. Of course, it's supposed to be the, nuclear symbol or whatever, but, you have the staging, you have sort of a pillar. Again, it kind of looks like a portal or whatever, but, some people say it's the eye. Regardless, they put the last piece of the isotope or whatever into the thing. And I mean, okay, whatever. So bottom line, this is all part of the New World Order Illuminati agenda to bring order out of chaos, to bring about their global government. And, I've heard quite a bit of rumors from people that they're planning another false flag attack in America, similar to 9/11, where dirty suitcase nukes go off in several places around the country. I've also heard rumors about how they are preparing, maybe Russia is preparing an EMP attack on the United States so that the entire grid goes down. It would be a perfect opportunity to put the United States into chaos and, finally collapse the dollar and all that stuff. So, but don't fear. While the elite are going to fear-monger you to death every single day, they're going to say, oh my gosh, we're on the verge of war, nuke, 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 war, war, war. And even Christian ministries, I've seen a lot of Bible prophecy ministries talk about the whole Middle East situation. And a lot of times they're sort of fear-mongering too. And I've been accused of fear-mongering too. So I'm not saying I'm not. I don't think I am in terms of, that's not what I'm trying to do. Some ministries are definitely contingent on chaos, and that's all they talk about. I tend to look at the more supernatural and the technological and where those two mesh. And that some people say it's fear-mongering. I think it's just more interesting and more relevant, well, not more relevant, but, a different sector of what's going on. But some of these Christian ministries, all they do is fear, 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 just like the mainstream media. And I just really don't think that should be the case, especially when it comes to like the nuclear war, geopolitics, all this stuff. I think it perpetuates a war mindset that I think we need to move away from in terms of just as a humanity. And I don't think you have to be a Christian to agree with me on that. But, it's all sort of coming into play. It's all coming together for the purposes of the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Ultimately, God's in control here. With all the stuff that goes down, he's only allowing it to happen because Satan knows that his time is short, and ultimately he is going to restore and bring justice to this world. And that's one thing, I guess this will be the final piece of what I say in this video, but with so much evil in the world, there has to be some kind of transcendent justice that is served. And a lot of folks, they'll say, there's evil or bad things happen to good people. There's no God. But actually, that could be an argument for God, because the Bible tells us that God will judge. He is going to judge this world eventually. And if you think there's so many bad things going on and there is no transcendent judge, if there is no justice, ultimate justice that is served for the evils in this world, then my goodness, I mean, just the evil is just evil, and there's no ultimate good outcome at all from it. And, if you are not a believer in God, then what does it matter? Because, this is all just sort of an illusion anyway. It's actually a delusion, because you are making yourself believe that there is purpose in this life, when ultimately your atheism will lead you to nihilism, that nothing really matters because we are all just molecules in motion. But that's a whole nother rabbit trail that I'm not going to go down right now. Basically, I wanted to share this Brookings report again with you, just bring it into light and share it with friends and family. This link here that I'll leave in the description section. Read through it. I think it's really interesting, and see how the pawns are being moved and different strategies are playing out publicly. Because, they always do this. They always publish certain plans or agendas, with kind of a wide net, and then they follow it, maybe not to a T, but definitely to a certain level of accuracy to bring about what they're trying to bring out ultimately, which is a new world order. So That's about it for this video, guys. Please subscribe and share, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. God bless.